Today we are unhooking the main lift cylinder on the Massey Ferguson 204 forklift here. We blew the main seal, or blew a seal up here. You can see it sticking out right there. It just pours hydraulic fluid out of here. I just want to have the whole thing rebuilt. Hopefully we can find the seals for this, because I contacted a Massey Ferguson dealer and he looked up some of the seals. He said some of the seals are still available, but a lot of them are obsolete from Massey Ferguson. I'm gonna guess that those ones that are obsolete are probably made out of leather. If you didn't watch the video, we did just change the hydraulic fluid on this, but you cannot tell. That stuff looks nasty. And we drained everything that we could, but we didn't drain the cylinders. So I guess you do it now or you do it later. Next thing we need to do is pop the pins out of here. We'll leave this U-bolt here attached until we get those done, and then we can attach the U-bolt up here, and the cylinder should be pretty much free. There we go. There we go. If you ever wonder if spraying WD-40 or PV Blaster or any kind of penetrating oil, if it works, it does, but you have to wait a long time. See, we've got wet spots on here. So we're pounding the pin this way. So this is as far as that oil ever got in there. You can see the dry spots. If you're gonna use this, it's really helpful if you just spray it and let it sit overnight. Because just 10 or 15 minutes like we did is just not really that long. Oh, yep. Oh, man. Holy cow. Yeah, that was like Old Faithful spraying up here. Holy cow. But it missed me. It just got a little bit on my toe right there. Holy cow.
With it at the tip. I got the base.
You got the base? Okay. We're gonna see if we can pull the cylinder out. Yep, and drain the fluid out. We just want to try to get as much of the fluid out of here as we can. Make it lighter and less messy to take apart. We're pretty much at the end of the stroke. So we have to twist this cap here off the end. So I've got a spanner wrench to be able to put into these notches here and hopefully be able to break that loose. So when we torque on that, obviously this is going to want to spin. So my plan is to have this rod here go through the pinhole, and eventually that'll get to a spot where it can't twist anymore and we're torquing against this rod. And I think I'll also put a ratchet strap around the table here, around the cylinder, and tighten it up that way too. Might do it on that end as well, just to try to keep the cylinder as solid as possible. I put this spanner wrench on here, and the pins are round, so they roll right out of here as soon as you start putting any amount of torque on the wrench, which if you haven't seen one of these, pull it out and show you. First I thought, this thing's gonna be awesome. It's fully adjustable. It's really heavy duty, but you can see here these pins are round. And when you put it on here and you start torquing, it just basically slides right off of there. So this thing is going right back to Amazon. I was gonna try to make my own wrench, something with steel that I can basically slide on here and have all 4 pins locked in at the same time. And then I thought, you know what? Let's just try taking a chisel and I'll put it right in there like that, and then just tap it and see if we can get it to start moving. If we can get it to start moving that way, awesome. That's the way to go. That's moving. Did you see a tractor? Yeah. Let's go, quick. Before I spin this all the way off, I'm gonna try to break this nut loose and see if we can get this knuckle or pin off right here. This broke free relatively easy with the help of this big breaker bar. Put this big adjustable wrench here on, there's a spot here where you can flip a wrench on. Put that on there and just held the wrench and gave it some torque. Come loose pretty easy. I don't know how well you guys can see in there, but it looks like there's threads in there. The plan will be to take our chisel, pound it in there, and hopefully get that knuckle to spread apart a little bit, and then we'll stick our wrench back on here, stick a pipe through here, and see if we can unscrew that. There we go. Now we're pulling it down into the bench. Oh, what do you know? That's just fantastic. You know, I wasn't even sure this was gonna happen, so I didn't even, like, this table is all dirty, and so now that this is actually gonna come apart, I'm gonna get a broom. We're gonna clean this table off really nice. That way when we set stuff on there, we're not picking up dirt. I did some YouTube research, and it took me a while because this cylinder is not like 95% of all the other cylinders out there. John Deere and Massey Ferguson do these cylinders a little bit different. So normally you would just take this cap off, and this cap would slide off, and you'd have access to the rest of the cylinder. You can pull this rod right out. Not so with Massey Ferguson and some older John Deeres. So with these, you have to push this back into the cylinder, and then there's a snap ring in here that you need to remove. Then you can pull the whole thing out. The guy I watched on YouTube, he had a brass hammer and was tapping on this. I do not have a brass hammer. I am not going to buy a brass hammer. Doesn't seem like it's moving. I've had the penetrating oil soaking on it all day. I think we're just gonna let it sit all night like this, and then I'm gonna take my little propane torch and just warm this outside tube up, and hopefully that gives me just a little bit of extra that allows it to slide a little bit. We let this sit all night with the PB blaster in it, and this morning I came out here, just warmed the cylinder up with the torch for a bit till, I mean, it wasn't even really that hot. I could still keep my hand on it, or somewhat. So it was warm, but I wouldn't say that it was hot. Then I just, again, like we've got here, I've got the cylinder pushed all the way in so we don't scuff anything up that we shouldn't. Put this square tube over top of here. I got a piece of wood here to keep it pretty level so that it's hitting evenly on that gland nut, I guess you call it. And then took the sledgehammer and just as hard as I possibly can, I'm hitting that thing basically. And I've seen it start to move. Not very much, but a little bit. So the whole lesson here so far, take your time, be patient, let your penetrating oil do its job, and then just warm it up a little bit. I mean, hotter you can get it, maybe not hotter the better, but pretty hot so that this expands and it slides a little easier. So I'm gonna put the torch back on it, and then I'll put the earmuffs on and start hitting with the sledgehammer, and we'll try to get this ring nut here pushed pretty close to all the way up tight to the cylinder, and then we'll take it off. It's time to take that off. Yep, I'm starting to be able to see that snap ring there. In places it's just completely rusted out. If we get this thing slid back in here, we should be able to pick it all out, and then we can slide the whole thing right back out. Moving. So you can see in here, this ring right here, that's a snap ring. We've got our gland nut here pushed back into the cylinder enough to where we should be able to get this snap ring popped out. Let's see if I can maybe get on the back side here. Just hit it with the hammer and see if it'll pop out of that ring this way maybe. Sure did. if this is just the years of rust, but it literally almost just looks like a round piece of, it almost just looks like a round piece of wire. You know, obviously made out of spring steel, but it's not what I was expecting to pull out of there when I heard the term snap ring. So that's interesting. See if we can get some of this crap out of here. So now we should be able to just basically use this as a slide hammer and ram this whole piece right out. Before we slide this out though, I'm going to unhook the pin down here and kind of tip this up and then spray some blaster and stuff in here and try to wash some of that crud and rust out of here. Okay, here's what we've got. We've got our, I guess you'd call this the gland nut. I'm not really sure. It's not really a nut. It's more, I don't know, plunger. Here's our nut that holds this to the top. There's a snap ring on the inside that basically keeps this from going up and down. So this nut pulls this up tight to the snap ring. We've got these rubber seals right here. We've got this nut on here. I think I'm going to use the same method. Stick the eye hook there on the bar and see if I can get that off. Okay, this nut was 1 7/8 inches. I've got this 1-inch drive ratchet set that my great-grandpa had, that my dad now has. And that's what I've got on here with the breaker bar and a cheater bar. And I've got 3 of these, like, I don't know what they are, 500-pound ratchet straps, tightened down pretty tight. And then the crescent wrench on the rod here. And I already got it broke loose here. It took a decent amount of force. Looks like it's been taken apart before. Oh, so that just comes off like that. Seems like this one ought to do the same. Looks like it does. There we go. That just slides off. This is the dust cover that's completely blown out. Or that seal in there is completely blown out, and this dust cover is just completely wore out. So you can see in there. So we need to replace this O-ring right here and this dust cover right here. I'm not sure if there's other. Oh, and we need to replace these two right here. We got some unfortunate news right here. There's a pretty hefty scratch. Well, a couple of them, but the one is really deep. I don't think that it comes up above where the plunger would be, but it's pretty deep. It definitely hangs up in your thumbnail. It's a deep gouge. But this up here, you could probably get most of that out with a hone. I guess it's gonna depend on what seals cost. If I can get seals for 50 to 100 bucks, we're probably just gonna put them in here and run it as long as we can and see what happens. All right, guys, we took the piston and gland nut to this guy. I called the hydraulic place down the road and they said, we're not gonna have any of that stuff probably. You should go to this steel and welding supply place. Long story short, he's able to find all of these seals through his catalogs that he has. The cup seals on the end of the piston, he said those come in one piece and there's no center hole punched in it yet. So he's gonna, with his machine shop, he's gonna have those precisely cut. He said probably the reason why it was leaking up so hard out the top of the cylinder is not because the O-ring inside there looked pretty good. The dust seal was horrendous, but he said that doesn't actually seal anything. It's that O-ring inside there that does all your sealing, and that can only hold so much pressure. What was probably happening is there was holes in those cups, and so fluid is being pushed through there and it can't drain back to the reservoir fast enough, and so it's running up past that O-ring and right out the top. He said the pitting on the rod, that can definitely be an issue, but the O-ring wasn't chewed up very bad, and so he said he suspects it'd probably be okay. That's really only affecting the pressure on the downstroke, and there really isn't that much pressure, if any, on the downstroke, unless you're pushing on something. So he said that even if that O-ring wears out, it's not the end of the world. You might get a little bit of leakage, but not a terrible lot. I cannot be more appreciative to this gentleman. Man, he's got knowledge about these old cylinders that, quite frankly, I could not find online. I mean, and I couldn't find these parts either. This cylinder, I would just end up buying a used cylinder on Facebook Marketplace if it was not for this guy, because I wouldn't be able to get the parts. I just got the gland here back from the shop. He reassembled everything, which I wasn't planning on having him do that, but he did it for me anyway. Very nice guy. So let's just kind of go over what was done here and how this is put together. So we'll start with the gland here. We had an oil seal put in here. This is our old seal. Came out pretty hard. I was there with him when he took this out, and it was a booger to get that thing out. We've got a new one in here. We've got a parts list right here. This is most of the parts that he put in here. I see that he's missing a couple of the O-rings and stuff on here, but this will get you started anyway. For some of the bigger stuff like the oil seal here. This oil seal doesn't quite go all the way to the bottom here like the other one did, but I don't think that's a huge problem. We've got another O-ring in here. It's a pretty thick one. That one, I couldn't find the old one. It's not in here anymore. Then we've got an O-ring and a backup O-ring or washer. It's like the flat style here. So that pretty much covers the gland here. And then we've got our cup seals here. So he machined new holes in the new cups here because he said these cups just come as one piece. So like the center here isn't cut out so that you can cut it to different rod sizes. So he machined the holes out in that for me. And then on the inside here, you can see there is an O-ring and then a backup washer on each side. So that's like these ones here. So it's an O-ring and then a backup washer on each side. We're gonna get a lot better performance out of this cylinder. I'm hoping that we can lift a lot heavier stuff, and I'm also hoping that we don't have the leak down effect going on, because when I would put this up, as soon as you would shut it off, it was instantly starting to move back down. So I think we'll be done with that. So before we can stick this back in the cylinder, we're gonna clean the cylinder out with some carb cleaner and stuff, because there is some just debris and stuff inside the cylinder and some old oil that we want to flush out. They got these scuffing pads I'm just going to use to kind of clean up the rusty part of the front of the, or the top of the board here, of the cylinder. Just want to make sure we don't have any crazy burrs or anything like that that are going to rip up our cups or O-rings when we slide them in there. We're going to put our gland back on first. Got some oil here. I'm just gonna lube everything really well. We want everything to slide really nice and easily when we put it back together. We're really not gonna put too much oil on this, I don't think. You know, coat everything really, really well. All right. Just gonna kind of twist and push. There we go. Slides on there nicely. I'll put our cups back in. Go up here. Coat the outside of our cups. All the edges. Go. When you're putting these back together, you can see there's kind of a ring around here. Make sure the ring goes in onto the cup. So that kind of pinches on the cup and makes another seal point right there. So you want your nice flat ends to be on touching the rod and then touching the nut. What is this? 1 7/8 ratchet here. In case you missed what we set up last time, I've just got a bunch of ratchet straps holding the rod down, and I've got an adjustable crescent wrench here. So this keeps it from turning and this keeps it from lifting up. I'm not putting any Loctite on this nut because it didn't seem like there was any on there before. The guy at the shop told me that this is low pressure hydraulic equipment probably, and so things are different. That's why we just have regular O-rings and backup washers here. There's not like the newer style O-rings in here. This is all just old stuff. So it doesn't need to be quite as crazy tight as some of the newer stuff. but we are still gonna make sure it is very tight. I mean, it is gonna be tight, but we don't need it like Loctited together and stuff like that. Okay, we do have some pitting and scratches on our shaft here, which is unfortunate, but I don't think that this is gonna make a huge deal. I talked to the guy, he said, yes, ideally you would probably have a new rod made because some of these pits are pretty deep. But he said as long as it doesn't feel like it's gonna scratch your O-ring, it'd probably be fine. So I don't think that when we're lifting that there's gonna be that much fluid leaking by where there's gonna be so much pressure in here that it's gonna leak out like it was before because it can't go down the bypass tube fast enough. Because really that's what we decided was probably happening, is that there's so much fluid leaking past this bottom cup right here that it was starting to pressurize between the gland here and the bottom cup, and so it started forcing its way up through here and out through the cylinder instead of just bypassing down that tube. You know, there's fluid bypassing down through that tube, but there was so much leaking by and so much pressure in there that that tube couldn't keep up. He also made this new snap ring for me. It's just spring wire. I think it was 1/8" wire, and he had an arbor, I think he called it, to roll it to the right size. All right, so I poured some oil in here. I'm just lubing everything up so that things slide nicely. Nothing gets bound up. We're gonna have to take this off to put our nut back on here, which, oops, I should have put that back on. I should have put this on when we slid the gland on there. This first cup is the one this is the toughest part in my opinion, because this cup fans out, and so we have to get it to go into the bore here. The rest of them should all slide in pretty easily. I think I'm just gonna get on the end of the rod here and lift it up and just kind of try to twist in one direction only and push and see if we can get it to slide in. There we go. I should have twisted it the other way, because when I'm twisting it this way, and that's loosening the coupler on the end of the rod here, and so it broke loose, and now I can't really twist that hard. I think maybe we'll just take the hammer and tap on the end and see if we can get it to slide in there. Yep, it's moving. Gonna lube up the rest of the cylinder here. Make sure everything slides really nice. So we don't want to push this gland in all the way like we did when we took it out. So we're going to try to keep this thing just above the rod as it's going in. And then when we do push it in, we will only push it in far enough to get the snap ring in, and then hopefully we can get the snap ring in while still having some threads out here visible. And then we can put the nut on there, and that'll pull the gland all the way up tight. left is the snap ring. Ah, nuts. There we go. Alright, I think I'll get a screwdriver. Maybe this pick will work. Just make sure it's all the way back in the groove. Looks like it is. Okay, I think you can kind of see it in there. It's difficult to get a complete shot of it. Yeah, you can see it a little better right there. You can see the snap ring in there. Seems to be seated nicely. I'm gonna put the nut on there and start tightening it down. When we start tightening the nut down, it'll pull the gland out, and if that ring isn't seated nicely, then it'll just pop out and pull all the way out. So we should know pretty quickly whether or not we have a good seat in there or not. Feels pretty solid now. Yeah, we're definitely up against that snap ring now. Feels pretty solid. I'm happy with that. Not gonna lie, for a minute there I thought this was a very bad idea. I talked to the hydraulic guy because I was wondering about all the air. Do I need to like pre-fill this with fluid or something like that? He said, no, these should self-purge themselves as you cycle it. You want to cycle it all the way to the end, all the way down, all the way up a few times, and that should push the air out of the system. I really want to just start it up and see how it goes, but I am restraining myself because this still leaks. So that'll be the next video. I'm taking this off and I'm gonna pull this whole assembly here apart, and I'm assuming there's just O-rings in here that need to be replaced. So I'm gonna be doing that. So that's gonna wrap up this video.